Let me tell you something. If you've ever thought money could shield a family from heartbreak, you need to hear what happened inside that big old mansion on the hill. Because the night Daniel Mitchell pushed open his front door and saw his 7-year-old daughter, Emily, on her knees in a puddle, dress ripped and hands bleeding, every illusion he'd ever held about success shattered right then and there. Yeah, that really happened, and honestly, it still rattles me just thinking about it. You want to talk about betrayal? Try discovering the worst threats to your child aren't out there in the world, but coming from inside your own house, from the people who swore to protect her. The minute Daniel took in that scene, his little girl scrubbing floors under the cold, watchful eye of Margaret, the woman he'd let into their lives after Sarah passed away, something broke loose in him. The house wasn't quiet anymore. It was screaming for him to finally act. Emily, tough as she tried to be, couldn't hide what Margaret was doing. Nobody could have missed those raw, bleeding hands, even if she never made a sound. But Daniel, he'd been running from grief for so long that facing this reality was like walking into a wall. He'd buried himself in work, hiding from the ache of losing Sarah, his wife. Honestly, can you blame him? But every time he looked at Emily, he saw Sarah's face, heard Sarah's last words in his head, "Don't ever leave her alone." And yet here he was, letting silence swallow everything that mattered. Margaret? She wore that string of pearls that used to belong to Sarah, parading around like she owned the place, spouting lines about discipline and tough love. But the chill in her voice, no one could call that love. When Daniel questioned what was going on, she just smiled that tight little smile, twisting the story so fast it would make your head spin. Emily, wide-eyed and trembling, couldn't say a word. She'd been warned, and if you've ever seen a child shrink back from an adult, you know, it hits you right in the gut. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He dug out an old letter from Sarah, tucked away in a drawer since the funeral. Her handwriting still so gentle. "Don't trust the wrong hands. Our daughter's eyes will tell you the truth." Those words broke him. He realized, maybe for the first time, that he'd been absent even when he was there. He hadn't just let Emily down. He'd let Sarah down too. The next morning, Daniel started paying attention. He noticed the bruises on Emily's wrists, the way she'd flinch at Margaret's voice. Even the small things, the rag, the tattered dress, the way she clung to her cup of water as if it was a lifeline. He brought in Jacob, his old friend and lawyer, and quietly, carefully, they put a plan together. Yeah, real cloak and dagger stuff. Legal recorders, timed appointments, waiting for the perfect moment to catch the truth. Here's where the story turns. Because it wasn't just Margaret in on it. Richard, Daniel's own brother, shows up with big promises and a big smile, talking about family and sharing the burden, but it all felt like a setup. Emily, sharp as a tack, handed Daniel a tiny, folded note under the table. "Daddy, don't sign." For words, but it was all he needed. They played along, snapping pictures of the fake documents, sending them off to Jacob, who called back with the kind of news that makes your blood run cold. It wasn't management. It was an outright attempt to steal everything, Emily's future included. You want drama? Picture the showdown at dinner. Daniel, with the legal crew waiting outside, plays the audio for everyone to hear. Margaret's voice, cruel and clear, threatening to scatter Sarah's ashes if Emily ever spoke up. The whole room froze. Nobody could pretend anymore. Emily broke down, sobbing into Daniel's shoulder, while Margaret and Richard blustered, then finally got cuffed and let out the door by Sheriff Frank and his deputies. And man, I don't care how tough you are, seeing a child finally safe in her father's arms, that gets you. But it's not all neat endings, is it? Because even after the villains are taken away, the healing takes longer. The nightmares kept coming for Emily, but Daniel was there, night after night, whispering, "I'm here, and I'm not leaving again." They started therapy with Leah Simmons, learned to name the colors of fear and safety, rebuilt their world one careful step at a time. And then came the piano, a gift from a neighbor, just like the one Sarah used to play. Emily struggled at first, but slowly, with Daniel beside her, the music came back, thin and shaky at first, but real. A year later, she played at her school's recital, her mom's song, all the way through, with Daniel watching from the front row, heart in his throat. She finished, the crowd stood, and for the first time in a long time, the applause wasn't just for the music, but for her courage. Even Richard, locked up and stewing, saw the newspaper mention of that recital. Emily's name right there, a reminder that you can't kill hope with greed. And Daniel, now, he's present in ways he never thought possible. He volunteers, helps other families, makes lemonade with Emily on lazy afternoons, hangs a sign on their porch, House of Music and Lemonade. Every little act a promise kept. There's a line Sarah wrote, "Your child's eyes will tell you the truth," and Daniel finally learned to listen. So did the whole community, honestly. People stepped up, offered help, stood up when it counted. And Emily? She's not that scared little girl scrubbing floors anymore. She's playing the piano, leading her own song, knowing her father will always be right there, listening to, yes, oh, let me ask you, what would you have done in Daniel's shoes? Have you ever seen a community rally to protect a child? Did a moment in this story hit you? Make you think twice about what justice really looks like? If so, drop your thoughts below, share a story, or send a word of encouragement. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the bridge someone needs to find their way out. And if you want to hear more stories where good people win, where hope shows up in unlikely places, you know what to do. Comment, share, and stay tuned for the next one. Because out there, right now, someone needs to know that healing is possible and that the dawn does come, even if it shows up quietly, between two people who finally learn to trust each other again. I'll tell you, I really thought we'd made it through the storm after that first year. Emily was growing stronger. Her laugh got a little louder every week. Her confidence built up like those slow, stubborn spring flowers that break through frost. Daniel, yeah, he changed too, in ways that snuck up on everyone. The old mansion started to feel less like a museum and more like a home again. Music drifting down the halls, the clatter of lemonade glasses on the porch, neighbors dropping by with casseroles and awkward, genuine hugs. But you know how life is. Just when you start to breathe easy, something new shows up at the door. This time, it arrived in the shape of a letter. Plain envelope, no return address, just Mitchell residence, written in a careful, unfamiliar hand. Daniel hesitated before opening it, that old feeling creeping up his spine. Inside, 3 lines, printed out, cold as ice. Not everyone forgives and forgets. We remember. Watch your back. He set the letter on the kitchen table, not wanting Emily to see. But the past, as it turns out, doesn't just vanish because you want it to. The authorities traced it to a P.O. box a few counties over, nothing definitive. Margaret's trial was over. She'd gotten time and mandatory counseling. Richard was still locked up, but whoever sent that note. Well, fear has a way of sneaking through the cracks, doesn't it? Daniel didn't let on to Emily, but he started double-checking the doors at night, kept his phone close, reached out to Sheriff Frank for advice. Frank just looked him in the eye, steady as ever, and said, "You did right by your girl. Don't let old ghosts chase you off your porch." It sounded simple, but it meant the world. Life kept rolling. Emily began inviting her friends over. First just 1 or 2, then a small, messy crowd, their shoes piling up by the door, laughter echoing down the hallway. Daniel listened from his study sometimes, not wanting to intrude, just grateful for the ordinary sounds of childhood. He started teaching her how to ride a bike, running alongside her down the sidewalk, shouting encouragement as she wobbled and nearly crashed. "I'm here, I got you," he called, over and over, until she let go of fear and just pedaled. One afternoon in late summer, something unexpected happened. The Mitchells got an invitation to a neighborhood block party, first one since before Sarah got sick. Daniel almost said no. Old habits die hard, but Emily was the one who said, "Let's go, Dad. Maybe we could bring lemonade." That's how it began. Father and daughter showing up, a little awkward at first, carrying their big glass pitcher and a plate of cookies that Emily had decorated herself, lopsided hearts and all. People noticed. The Joneses, then Gwen family, old Mrs. Carter from across the street, even the kids who used to avoid eye contact at school. There was a quiet shift, almost like the whole neighborhood exhaled at the same time, like everyone had been waiting for permission to care again. Emily ended up at the center of a wild game of tag, her hair flying, cheeks flushed, her laugh carrying further than it ever had before. Daniel stood back, arms crossed, letting himself feel proud in a way he'd forgotten. But the world isn't perfect, and kindness doesn't always win without a fight. At the party, a new face showed up. A man in a tailored suit, slick hair, the kind of grin that never reaches the eyes. He introduced himself as Martin Hayes, a property consultant, saying he'd recently bought up half the lots on the far end of the street. He had questions about the Mitchell place, its history, its boundaries. Daniel's guard went up instantly, and when Martin's smile lingered a beat too long on Emily, every parental instinct kicked in. Later that night, Daniel did some digging. Turns out, Martin was fronting for a corporate group with ties to, you guessed it, some of Richard's old business partners, the kind who don't mind playing dirty. This wasn't about lemonade stands or block parties. It was about leverage and maybe even revenge. That here's where that new twist lands. For the first time, Daniel didn't shrink back. He gathered the neighbors, really brought them together, not just for small talk, but for action. They organized a community watch, set up regular meetings, got the local paper involved. Sheriff Frank ran safety workshops in the rec center. Leah Simmons spoke about childhood trauma and healing. And even Mrs. Helen Carter played the piano at the first public meeting, her hands steady on the keys. Emily, for her part, stood up in front of everyone one evening, voice shaking at first, but growing strong, and talked about how a neighborhood, a family, isn't just a name on a deed. Home is who shows up for you when you're scared, she said, and who believes you, even when it's hard. There were tears in more than a few eyes that night, including Daniel's. Martin Hayes and his shadowy bosses tried their moves, sending intimidating letters, making lowball offers, even showing up with a clipboard, snapping photos at the edge of the property. But this time, the Mitchells weren't alone. The whole community rallied around them, refusing to be bullied, shining a light on every scheme until there was nowhere left for the darkness to hide. By winter, the consultants had moved on, looking for easier marks. It wasn't just about defeating the bad guys. It was about what happened afterward, the trust rebuilt, the sense of safety that returned, not just for Emily, but for every kid on the street. People started talking more, sharing rides to school, swapping recipes, watching out for one another the way small towns are supposed to. And Daniel? He finally stopped waiting for the next disaster. He opened up, joined the town council, coached Little League, found a way to channel all those hard lessons into something bigger than himself. Sometimes, late at night, he'd still wake up, haunted by all the ways things could have gone wrong. But then he'd hear Emily's steady breathing down the hall, or the sound of piano keys in the early morning, and know they were truly, finally safe. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for. To build something strong enough to weather the storms, to raise our voices when it counts, to find healing not in isolation, but together. Dawn doesn't always break with fanfare. Sometimes it just slides quietly across the porch, lighting up the faces of people who dared to hope. So what about you? Has your neighborhood ever faced something that brought you closer or tried to pull you apart? What would you do if someone threatened your peace, your family, your community? Drop your stories and your thoughts in the comments below. And if this tale gave you something to hold on to, share it, because hope, like lemonade and music, is best when passed around. Thanks for sticking with us. See you in the next story, where, who knows, maybe the smallest act of courage changes everything.